topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. My team and I help companies discover and articulate their purpose to thread it through their culture and operations. We work with forward-thinking or forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. And we provide programs enabling individual team members and leaders to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. With us today is Edward Sullivan, who has been coaching and advising startup founders, Fortune 10 executives, and heads of state for over 15 years. His clients include executives from Google, Salesforce, Slack, and dozens of other fast-growth companies. He is the co-author of Leading with Heart, 5 Conversations that Unlock Creativity, Purpose, and Results. He and co-author John Baird now lead Velocity, a renowned executive coaching consultancy. We'll be talking about the state of business today and the call for elevated leadership, and then talk about each of the 5 conversations they describe in the book. Edward joins us today from New York City. Edward, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Hi, Elise. So happy to be here.
Thank you. It's so great to have you. As I mentioned, it's just so great to be able to meet people like you that I wouldn't have any other reason to meet, but you wrote a great book. And actually, let's just show it really quick because it's just so gorgeous. Look at this thing, listeners, viewers. It's just gorgeous. I love reading this stuff. You're so welcome. So great to celebrate you. And of course, I align with your message, and I think it's brilliant. So I said a little something about your background here, but would you just say a little bit more about, what you've done, your background, and why in the world do you like coaching so much? I mean, you could be, an architect, you could be an accountant. Why this?
I was many things before becoming a coach, so it's a fitting question.
Okay.
My early career was actually in nonprofit management and electoral politics. I traveled all over the world with a guy named James Carville and helped get people elected in offices of president and parliament in South America and Eastern Europe and Africa. And my journey into coaching is pretty interesting. I was doing like a mid-career MBA at the Wharton School in San Francisco. And I was telling these stories of politics and working in business and Silicon Valley and everything around the lunch table. And one of my classmates said, well, wait a minute. If you've helped get 3 people elected president around the world, you can probably help me get a promotion at BCG. So he hired me on the spot as her executive coach. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. And then things just kind of developed very naturally. Soon I was coaching executives at Google and Bechtel and Macy's. And now I run this firm, Velocity Coaching, with my business partner and co-author John Baird. And we work with the CEOs of companies like Geico and Harry's and Sweetgreen. And it's really been a blessed journey.
So great to know you, Edward. And, gosh, if you can help get 3 presidents elected, maybe you can help me too. I don't know. I'm writing my next book. So, hey, speaking of that, right. Thank you. Speaking of that, I want to get your perspective, Edward. I mean, I have mine as to why leadership needs to be fundamentally elevated today. But from your vantage point, Edward, would you present for us what's going on in the world? Why is your book necessary now?
We wrote this book because essentially we feel that we're in the middle of a leadership crisis. The American workplace is broken. It's no longer fun to work, right? I mean, we're seeing the great resignation. People aren't leaving their jobs because they want better pay or better benefits. There was a study done by the Sloan School in January that showed that by a 10-to-1 margin, people are fleeing from toxic work cultures over seeking more pay, right? So we actually think that half the problem with inflation is just Silicon Valley companies throwing money at their employees to get them to stay instead of fixing their culture. So this book is about that.
So speaking of toxicity in the workplace, I think you are episode 368. But I had Melanie Pump on talking about her book about workplace toxicity. And it is an incredible problem. And leaders don't understand that. They're not understanding just how toxic the environment is. So I completely agree with that. But you also go on to cite a few of the things that I think are important for us to presence too in your book. You also talk about how Gallup says that 2 in 3 Americans are not involved in or enthusiastic about their work and workplace, and 50% are actively looking for a new job, which we know because of the Great Resignation. Right. So those are huge numbers.
They're huge numbers, and what we found is the problem is people aren't necessarily leaving the content. They're not leaving their colleagues. They're leaving their managers. They're leaving their leaders. And the essential problem in leadership today is leaders are focusing on what they need to get done, not what their teams need to get things done. And that's why in the book, we explore this whole conversation about what do people really need to feel creative and resourceful as the foundation of the entire framework. Because at the end of the day, if I'm only focused on what you can do for me, I'm not at all focusing on what you need to be able to get anything done for me. Right. Essential question. We talk a lot about the metaphor of the gardener in the book. The gardener doesn't go around the field kind of yelling at flowers and putting them on performance improvement plans, right? The gardener is like, oh my gosh, the plants are wilting. I need to do something. They're not performing. It's my job to fix it. And the American manager, the American leader doesn't see it that way. Right now, the American leader is putting all of that onus on the plants, their employees. And we want to flip that script, and we want leaders to take responsibility.
So 2 questions to that, Edward. So one is, there's with so much evidence. I mean, not forget about just what Gallup says. Forget that Gallup says that 2 out of 3 people are not into their work at all. Let's just go into your own backyard company, and you can see that people don't want to be there, or that you've got vacancies that you can't fill, and your productivity is sucks, all kinds of things here. My question to you is, why in the world aren't more companies utilizing and developing their leaders and their managers, or coaching, or trying to elevate? What's the reticence there?
For some reason, people think that management should come naturally, right? They think it's something we shouldn't invest in. It's one of those soft skills, right? We invest in training for STEM, we invest in training for engineering, right? But very little investment goes into training people how to develop and inspire others. And we actually think, John, my business partner and my co-author, and I are on a crusade to put the soft skills at the center, right?
Yeah.
It's about the people, what we call people skills, the relational skills. Those are the most important skills in the American business place, and they're the least invested in. So we're hoping to flip that whole conversation and get people talking about what we think is most important. At Stanford, the hardest class to get into at Stanford Business School is what they call touchy-feely, right? Touchy-feely, which again, is a terrible name.
That's what they call it. That says so much right there.
It says so much right there. All these engineers and scientists like, I've got to take that touchy-feely class because that'll help me work with people. That should be half the curriculum.
Yeah. So really quick on that, before I touch on my second question I wanted to ask you on, is that we've covered this before in other episodes, Ed. We're talking about how, to your point, the touchy-feely soft skill stuff ought to be at the center. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's one of the best ways you can distinguish yourself from a machine. You have the ability to develop emotions and relationships, and a machine cannot do that. That's how you distinguish yourself in the workplace. I highly encourage you to develop those soft skills so that you have a place in the workplace alongside technology. Bare minimum, right? To stay employed.
At a bare minimum.
Right. So the second follow-up question I wanted to talk to you about, that whole notion of training for managers, or lack thereof. One of the things that I found really quite troubling, Edward, as I'm working with some of my clients, and we're working on their culture, and we're infusing the meaning and purpose. And I'm telling them, look, in order to be able to stem this tide of the Great Resignation, we really do need to be able to shore up even more practices to make this a more worker friendly. We need the flexibility and the hybrid, the work from home kind of stuff is all really important. And what I'm getting is this smug look that is, well, that won't last very long. When we get into the downturn, we're not going to have to work like that. We won't have to bend over backwards for our employees to keep them happy. What is your perspective on that?
Our perspective is that it's not about keeping people happy. It's making them productive. It's helping them be creative, right?
Yeah.
Employees that don't feel appreciated, literally, at least their prefrontal cortex shuts down. They get switched to fear mode. They're just trying to protect themselves. They're wasting all this energy showing up, trying to pretend to be perfect, to have executive presence, right? All these terms we've learned over the years for faking it till you make it. They're wasting half the energy doing that, as opposed to solving really hard problems, being creative, making the sale, right? Do this because it's good for business, not because it makes people happy.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple.
Well, and I'll add to that as well. The book that I'm writing is really about, how to activate meaning and purpose into the business to radically enliven it. And it's really also about just really elevating everything about you as a leader in your company that's serving all the stakeholders. It's just trying to put your very best self forward. Why would you want to go, if you make it to, let's say you make it to a sophomore in college, why do you want to go back to be an 8th grader in elementary school? If you've already elevated like that, why do you want to go backwards?
The companies that we see that are performing the best, it's the companies not where the leaders are riding their employees and squeezing the most productivity out of them. It's where people love their jobs.
Yes.
People just love showing up. They work long hours because they love it. They come up with creative solutions because it's fun, right? It's not ridden and they're being punished and like the hard discipline, like that is so 30 years ago. That's so
it really is.
Jacked up, right? That whole idea of like show up, be afraid, work your tail off, work long hours because you feel like you have to, as opposed to, wow, I love this work. I really have a great relationship with my manager. We joke around. We have honest, connected conversations. I feel committed and I feel super creative here. That's how you want to be feeling.
Yeah, and they write, and at the same. So I've always believed. I mean, I was raised by 2 entrepreneurs. I believe firmly, and this is why I'm out doing the work that I'm doing, is that work ought to be your greatest sandbox. It ought to be the place where you have the greatest fun. You come alive. You become the best version of yourself. That's to me what work is all about, and that's the kind of places that I'm trying to help companies create. This whole notion of, let's just go ahead and as you come in there, we're going to go ahead. This might hurt a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and remove your soul. And then we're going to take your heart out. We'll leave you right here by the door for it. Wait, you can pick them up on the way out kind of thing. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's almost like there's still this whole idea of the factory worker, the assembly line worker has gotten into the American office. The American, knowledge worker is, people think that they're most valuable when they're tied to their desks, cranking away on their computer.
When I can see them,
people most can valuable see them. Sometimes when they're daydreaming, when they're out for coffee and they're connecting with colleagues and they go, I came up with a new solution for that. It's going to save us $500,000, right?
Yeah.
Those great ideas don't come from grinding. They come from being playful and feeling connected to purpose, as you said.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of that, one of the things, many things about your book, it's incredibly well written, it's well organized, it's well structured, and it's chock full of really awesome, cool stories. So I thought it might be great for this first segment, if we could just kind of finish this segment, if you could just share maybe a story or example of someone that you've worked with, or who has maybe even ideally perhaps reticent themselves to learn something new, that kind of went through, maybe had an aha moment with you, and now has a different way of being, leading, and performing and realizing results.
Yeah. Happy to. We just launched the book last Saturday at the headquarters of one of our longtime clients.
Cool.
Yeah. So here in New York, we went to the office of Hinge, which is a dating app. They are in the business of creating relationships, helping people find love. And Justin McLeod, the CEO, speaks very publicly about when I first met him and when he first met us, he was about to quit. Right. He wasn't happy. He didn't have a great relationship with the parent organization. He was going around the office, kind of barking orders at people. He considered himself, the chief critique or the chief critic, rather than the chief executive officer. And nobody was happy, right? It was a low morale organization. And we began working together, and I just held up a mirror to Justin. He did all the work himself. That's the beauty of coaching. We hold up a mirror, kind of do a little bit of chiropractic adjustment here and there. And he started seeing, I want to be the chief coach, not the chief critic. I want to lead with love, not with fear. How can we build a product and a company that makes people feel all gooey inside if we feel all nervous inside building it, right? Mm-hmm. So over the course of 4 years, his transformation has been nothing short of remarkable. Hinge now, it was kind of flatlining when we met. Hinge is the fastest growing dating app in the world. They're about to go into Europe. They're the kind of the crown jewel of Match Group's entire suite of dating apps. And Justin just signed on for another 4 years at the helm. He could have checked out last year. He had his second baby. He hit the end of his runway, his earnout after the acquisition. And he said, no, I'm having too much fun. I'm going to stay. And it's just really beautiful to see that when we can help people connect to their sense of purpose and to their sense of, I want to be a heart-led leader. I want to feel good and help people feel good. All these beautiful things happen in the business, right? There's this idea in the American workplace that I can't be soft. I have to be the hard leader. It's better to lead by fear. People won't respect you if you're too soft on them. And that's BS. It's just false, right? It's a false narrative that we inherited from the military, that we inherited again from Jack Welch. I've been thinking a lot about Jack Welch because my buddy wrote a book on him that's going crazy right now as well. You should have him on next.
Okay, send him.
David Gellis from the New York Times. And all of that is old. And I think the other thing we're learning is that today's employees, from millennials down through Gen Z, they're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, and I'm with you.
We out. Really, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Right? I can find other things to do. Mm-hmm. And I think employers are learning that it's good for retention. It's good for the bottom line, just like as Justin found at Hinge. When they transform and really open up and soften, begin to enjoy the work, everyone else enjoys it too.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to comment on that, but let's grab our first break. Sure. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're in the air with Edward Sullivan, who's the co-author of Leading with Heart, 5 Conversations that Unlock Creativity, Purpose, and Results. We've been talking a bit about how he got into this business, why he likes coaching, what's going on in the business world that requires this kind of work. After the break, we're going to start into the conversation, getting into those 5 conversations. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. Before we get back into the contents, while you're out on Amazon checking out Edward's new book, check out mine as well. It's called Purpose Ignited. And I really wrote that book to awaken readers to their passion and their purpose and start them down the path of becoming an inspirational leader. So that's the basis of my leadership program. So I hope you'll check it out. If you're just joining the program, my guest is Edward Sullivan, the author of Leading with Heart, 5 Conversations that Unlock Creativity, Purpose, and Results. He and co-author John Barrett are also the founders and leaders of Velocity, a renowned executive coaching consultancy. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So I wanted to weigh into what you were saying about the coaching that you're doing with the Hinge leader, and just share with you that one of the big reasons I love working with leaders and organizations is, one, when I get to have those moments when you see them transform, you literally get to watch their molecules change right in front of your eyeballs. It is the most profound, beautiful thing to bear witness to, I find.
Yeah.
And then, right. And the second part then is to be able to then see the needle move inside the organization as their person and behaviors start to cascade into the organization to make that difference. And that is just like, best caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you feel good, right? It's like,
it does.
Get the juice from being the coach and just witnessing that happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, to your point, holding the mirror up, catalyzing all that, it's just, and then that beautiful trust and intimacy that comes with that relationship is just divine. Why I keep doing this after all these years. So let's get into your five conversations. I want to make sure that we get to all of them, because as you know, I want to talk about each of them. And then there's a couple bits that I want to dig into here because it's just gold. So the first one that you talk about, the first characteristic and and relative conversation that leaders can have to unlock creativity, purpose, and result. The first one is that leaders are aware of their people's needs. Mm-hmm. And you talk about they need to get curious about what they and their teams need to feel creative and resourceful. Getting our needs met is the foundation of all higher order thinking and working. And when you aren't taking care of yourself or don't feel safe, you can't show up with your game. You're not going to ask the hard questions or make the risky suggestions. Completely true. But you guys have such a great way, Edward, of really talking about what do we mean by needs. So would you say a bit more about this particular characteristic? Why is this so important?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier in the program, a lot of leaders today are focusing exclusively on what they need from their employees. We need to get this by this date. I need it now. I need it then. I told you I needed that, right? It's all this like me.
Yeah.
But leadership is about you. It's like, how can I inspire you? How can I help you? How can I be a servant leader? And we've uncovered that the leaders that focus on 3 levels of needs with their employees do the best, right? We all have our baseline physical needs. Maslow explored these to great length. Yep. We need sleep, we need eat, we need hydration. We now find most people need some mindfulness, right? They need to kind of tune their body. We need exercise. If we're not getting our basic physical needs met, we're never going to be able to show up. We're going to be walking around as a zombie. We're going to be cranky, right? We're going to be feeling like we can't think straight. The second level of needs that we talk about in the book are the emotional needs. And this is where we start talking about psychological safety, feeling included, feeling like you are affirmed and recognized. This goes ignored by a lot of leaders. Many leaders tell us, I don't want to make people soft, right? I don't want to overpraise them because they'll just stop working. Have you ever seen a dog stop doing tricks when you give them treats, right? They just keep going. They want more and more treats. We're mammals. We're just like them, right? If you want me to do something, tell me I'm doing a great job. I'll do more of it, right? Yeah. Give me a little reward. Give me a wink. Make me feel included. I will be loyal. I will keep coming at you with that, right? It doesn't work the other way. You can't punish people for doing the wrong thing. That everything we know about motivation theory has shown that doesn't work. But 90% of the feedback that leaders give and managers give is negative feedback. Yeah. We need to flip that on its head. 90% positive feedback, and every so often that adjustment, right? The third layer of needs that we talk about in the book are environmental needs. And this is just now really being understood both in the research and also by leaders and managers. We're seeing more and more of the tech companies investing in new office spaces that have natural light, better airflow, better organization of the desks for people to have natural collisions, right? Gone are the days where only the managers had windows and everybody else was in a little cubicle farm in the middle with no light, those gross blue fluorescents, right?
Yes.
People felt sick. All of the jokes from The Office and Office Space and all the movies and TV shows about the American workplace are spot on. It was people really suffering for years in these terrible spaces. And now we've got employers focusing on making it comfortable, ergonomics, light, airflow. Oh my gosh, I can even see green out the window. What a revelation, right? And those 3 things, the needs, the physical needs, emotional needs, and environmental needs together, if leaders can have those conversations and understand what their teams need to feel creative and resourceful, they'll be much more successful. So that's the first. conversation. We explore.
Awesome. Love that. Well done. I appreciate how you just kind of laid it all out for us. Now, for the listeners and viewers who are like, that sounds all kind of interesting and nice and such. Of course. Okay. But for them or for anyone else, let's talk about what it looks like when those needs aren't met. So talk to us a little bit about what does it look like? How will we recognize when people's needs or our own needs are not met? What does that look like?
Well, when our needs aren't met, obviously when our physical needs aren't met, we're just not firing on all cylinders. We're sluggish, we're slow, we could be cranky. When our emotional needs aren't met, we often get triggered into the second chapter of the book, which is fear, right? When people don't feel safe, they become fearful. And when they are fearful, that's when the toxic behaviors start coming out. Mm-hmm. We've traced most toxic and unproductive behavior in the American workplace is related to people being triggered into a fear state. They're either triggered into flight, into fear, into fight, or into freeze, right? Mm-hmm. So like that employee that continuously doesn't get that thing done, doesn't deliver on time, they're not just being irresponsible, they're probably triggered into freeze. They're overanalyzing, they're unable to get it done. The employees that are constantly at each other's throats, taking credit from each other, they're triggered into fight together, right? They're trapped in this fear response together. So it's interesting how, we talked about needs as a foundation, because if you're not getting your needs met, you can't have the other conversations. Right. You can't talk about fear because I'm not getting my basic needs met as an individual. So the book kind of builds on itself from there. I'm happy to go a little bit more into fears if you think it's the right time.
I want to go into that next, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through all of your conversations. So let's sure. go into that second characteristic, which I really appreciate how you actually say it. You talk about they confront people's fears and their own. I think this is really, really powerful. So you say in your book, they directly address the fears that are holding people back. Fear keeps us from taking risks and compels us to do hurtful things and make bad decisions. If your team members don't feel safe saying something when they smell smoke, you will always be putting out fires. Great line. I have been inside organizations when fear was probably present everywhere myself. So say a little bit more about this notion of confronting fears. And then I definitely want to have you go through the framework that you offer in the book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is hands down the number one conversation we're not having in the American workplace.
Yeah, completely agree.
Everyone is walking around triggered into some fear state, but we can't admit it. We can't show weakness, right? Mm-hmm. Never let them see you sweat. We think that is just hogwash, right? The teams that come together and have the honest conversation say like, well, actually, I'm feeling a little fearful right now about this, or I'm feeling a little scared about that. I'm uncertain about this. I haven't gotten much feedback from you, so I don't know where I stand. The employees that can have those honest conversations with their leaders, and the leaders who show up for those conversations or initiate those conversations. Say, team, we're heading into a recession here. It's an uncertain time for everybody. Let's have a conversation about how everyone's feeling around this. Because I know, Jim is putting his kids through school and Sally just, refinanced on her house. Like, we're all dealing with some economic uncertainty right now. It's better to put those topics on the table so we can support each other. We don't do that in the American workplace right now. Very few places do. Thank goodness a lot of our clients are doing that more and more. We're helping them have those honest conversations. We're seeing incredible results, right? People feel safe. They feel more loyal. And ultimately, their fear responses come down. So all those toxic behaviors magically go away. We think we need to manage the behavior when actually we need to manage the fear that is motivating the behavior.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, and again, this is something that I think is really, really incredibly useful. Just that 4-point framework that you have, if you could just walk through that for us. And so we can, and this is what I think is great. We do this for ourselves as leaders, and we help our team members do the same thing.
That's right. So the first thing is we need to help people name their fear. When a leader gets up and says, hey, guess what? I'm scared too. Like, this is a lot. People think that, everyone's going to run for the hills. The leader is fearful. It's actually the leader is just being realistic. When someone gets up and says, nothing to fear here, don't worry, everything's going to be okay, everyone says, that guy's lying to us. She's not being truthful. They can sense the fake news, right?
Yeah.
So first thing is we need to name our fear. Second, we need to think about all the behaviors that are being triggered by that fear, right? Let's take stock and let's involve our teams in that. So we need to share our fear with the teams and get feedback. How are you seeing my fear coming up in our interactions? How have you been impacted by that, right? Then we need to, step 4 is to make a plan. How am I going to address this, right? And I'm going to have Jim hold me accountable. Hey, Sally, I want you to tell me when I'm doing that thing again. Edward, you're really being, that annoying nudge in the meetings. Oh, that's me just in my fear response. And then finally, we encourage people to share their story, right? Mm-hmm. Where did this come from? What is the originating story behind our fear response? Maybe I grew up in a house that was always uncertain. So a little bit of uncertainty really triggers me, right? Maybe I was bullied in school. Imagine if we could have those kinds of conversations in the workplace. So then suddenly everyone understands us. They put our responses and the way we react to things in context. And they say, oh, okay, I understand where that's coming from with Edward. I'm gonna help them through that.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. It's so smart. And I've seen leaders stand up and share their fears and in just how, and next I want you to, if you would, share that great example of where I think it was a CEO that was about to lose his company. I think that's the one, because you have so many great stories. I lost track of a few of them, but that story is so compelling, and so few leaders would be willing to do what he did, and therefore they're not going to get the result that he did either. So will you share that story?
Sure, absolutely. So we were working with one company a number of years ago where the market turned, they weren't able to pivot fast enough, and they were maybe not going to be able to raise the next round to stay alive. Startups need to raise the next round of money to stay alive, to live to fight another day. And, the CEO had a choice. He could either get up there and say, all right, guys, we can do it. Let's go. And everyone could see the writing on the wall. They knew that they weren't meeting their sales numbers. They knew they needed to rebuild the product almost entirely from the ground up to meet a new set of customer expectations. So instead of just getting up there and being a cheerleader, he got up there and said, hey, I'm nervous. I'm scared about losing the company. I'm scared about not raising this next round. I'm scared of what people will think back home. My dad, who said I should have gotten a job at the law firm, right? Everybody who's going to judge me. I'm scared shitless, frankly. Excuse my French.
It's all right. And we speak French on this show. It's all right.
I love that. and instead of hiding it and losing the respect of the team, and because the team knew what was going on, he created an opening for other people to share what was going on for them, right? So they actually created this activity in the office where everyone went around and shared a little bit about what was going on inside of them. And instead of it turning into a frenzy, a panic, it turned into a cathartic moment where everyone had all their cards on the table and said, wow, we all have so much to lose here, right? And also so much to gain if we can get it together, rebuild this product, come up with a plan, and execute really well, right? So just by having the conversation about fear, it's like flashing a light in the dark corner of a room. The darkness just goes away. As soon as people have given voice and let that fear out, they suddenly feel courageous. I was courageous enough to share my fear. I'm courageous enough to take the next step and save this company. And they were able to do that. They were able to circle the wagons and rally the troops, and everyone was bought in because they all felt like they'd been ultimately honest with each other. And it created this we call it the connective tissue, right? That bonds people together by vulnerability and by truth, as opposed to what a lot of leaders do is they try to just say, rah, 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 it's all going to be okay. Don't worry. And everyone knows under the surface that it's not going to be okay. And that's when companies get trapped in that death spiral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gorgeous rendition, Edward. So we're going to take our last break here before we go into our last segment here. So listeners and viewers, if you would, while we're on break, if you would take some time and reflect on where could you in your life and your leadership actually find what your fear is, share it with the team, just the way that Edward just shared that story to make it a profound difference. So while we're on break, if you would think about that, that'd be great. So we've been on the air with Edward Sullivan. He's the co-author of Leading with Heart, 5 Conversations That Unlock Creativity, Purpose, and Results. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been talking about a couple of the conversations. We're going to finish the last segment by finishing the other 3. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news I want to share with you before we get back into the program is while you're back out there looking on Amazon for Edward's book, also check out Passionately Striving and Why. That's an anthology that I curated and spent out for the last few months. What I did was I literally scoured the planet and I found 25 women to share their very personal stories of how they discovered their purpose and are now serving from it. So you can find their intimate stories there. And the idea is that in sharing them, you can get access to your own purpose and through their storytelling and start to be able to see your path. So I hope you'll check it out. If you're just joining us today, my guest is Edward Sullivan. He's the author of Leading with Heart, 5 Conversations That Unlock Creativity, Purpose, and Results. He and co-author John Baird are also the founders and leaders of Velocity, a renowned executive coaching consultancy. I'm your host, Elise Cortez. So we have 3 more to cover here, Edward. So let's go into double speak mode. You ready?
Jump into it.
Double French mode. Okay.
Great.
So then the third characteristic we want to get into is leaders understand their own desires and what drives their people. And you say they get very honest about what their core desires and drivers are, as well as those of their team. What's more, they make sure to keep those desires in check, lest they or their teams be derailed by them. So this notion of desires and drives, talk about that if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has a different core driver, right? One of the mistakes we make as leaders is we walk around with a hammer thinking everyone's a nail, as the old adage goes. And just because you are motivated to win doesn't mean everybody on the team is similarly motivated to win. Some people are motivated to serve. Some people are motivated to learn. Some people are motivated by a number of other things. And what we explore in the book is how to help people get enough of that to the point where they're really engaged and motivated, right? But not so much that they get derailed. And what we mean by derailed is, spoiler alert, we start out talking about, one of the great champions of cycling who was so motivated by winning that he fell down the path of corruption and cheating, right? Highly competitive work environments actually have higher unscrupulous behavior than non-competitive work environments. People just want to win and they'll do anything to win, right? Same thing. You would imagine that this desire to learn, how could we learn too much? Well, some companies get so into doing the research, they never move into execution mode, right? They get navel gazing or the paralysis of analysis. So we have to make sure that we're keeping those desires in check. So just enough to stay motivated and stay interesting, but not so much that we cascade down into bad behavior. So it's an interesting exploration there in the book about desires. And I think that the core thing for leaders to think about is that everyone has their own set of motivators. And it's really important to tap into everyone's unique formula. If you're a leader, hopefully you only have 5 to 7 direct reports. You can keep track of their individual needs, their individual desires. If you have more than that, you should come talk to us because your team is much too large.
Right. I agree. Well, what I also like about what you're saying there is, really understanding the desires as well as the drives and make sure that you don't get derailed. It's the same thing with strengths, right? A strength misapplied is called a weakness, according to Gallup. And so it's fascinating. I just think that's so important. And then the fourth characteristic and conversation, which I really jammed on, is leveraging their gifts. And I love how you say this, Edward, in your book. You say, these leaders search deeply inside themselves, their teams, for unrealized gifts. World-class skill and talent is often wasted because it goes undiscovered. Leading with heart requires giving up the idea of what you are good at to unearth what you might be great at. Oh, if you get nothing else out of the book, that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. This was a really fun chapter to write as well, because we talked to so many leaders and people in different companies, and a lot of them realized upon reflection, oh, at some point in my career, somebody saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. Right? It's the old adage of like, hey, you'd be better at this position, like on the sports team, or I know you want to be quarterback, but you'd be a better wide receiver, or whatever it is. Who was really great at that was Steve Jobs. We have a story in the book.
Yeah, you do.
Debbie Coleman was his controller, and she went to him and said, it seems like the Macintosh factory isn't run very well. I wonder if I could give that a go. And he kind of stepped back and he was like, you'd be great at that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He had all these like manufacturing experts trying to set up this factory, and all he needed is a meticulous, very process-minded individual who was an English major at Brown, to get in there and think differently. Apple's been about think different for a long time. And Debbie Coleman went in and revamped the entire Macintosh factory back in 1985 and basically saved Apple at the time.
Yeah. Wow.
She had no training whatsoever in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. I love this, Edward, this whole notion of leveraging the gifts and looking for the prize in people. That's absolutely something that I terribly advocate with people that I'm working with as well. And think about this, listeners and viewers. If you can help unearth a gift in someone that they didn't know they have, one, they're never going to forget you.
Never.
Your impact on them and your imprint on them is forever. They will go the extra mile for you because they love you, because you help them see something else in themselves. Your productivity is completely skyrocketed. Your creativity is skyrocketed. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing. Talk about, leading with heart. Such a beautiful thing to do for people.
It is. It's a great thing to do for people. Somebody found my gift years ago. One of my classmates said, Edward, you'd be a great coach. I resisted at first. The funny thing is, we often don't value our gifts because it comes too easily to us. Like, why would anyone pay me to do that? Right. I value the fact that I trained in this and I learned how to do that and I worked hard and I studied. But this other thing, this gift you're telling me I have, people told me my gift was empathy. Like, where did I learn empathy? I learned it as a child, right? Many of our gifts came through our experiences growing up, and they're just natural to us, but they're supernatural to other people.
Right. Yeah, I love it. It's so beautiful. All right, let's get to our fifth characteristic in conversation. They connect with purpose. Of course, I love that.
Yeah.
So you say they connect with their own core sense of purpose and help their team connect with theirs. Their greatest work is done by teams who believe that they are serving some greater good. The easiest mistake is to assume all your team cares about is money or prestige. So completely agree with that.
Yeah, so great. And I was so excited to come on your show to talk about this because I know you're the expert on purpose. So I'm hoping I can learn from you a little bit. One of them. But what we explore in the book is that everyone taps into their sense of purpose in a different way, right? They might find it through traveling and exploration. They might find it out on a walk. They might find it when someone taps on their shoulder and says, hey, I think you'd be good at this, right? It's kind of related to gifts in that way. Yes. But the important thing that really undergirds the entire chapter is this idea, as you said there at the end, we cannot mistake the fact that everyone wants to feel useful. Everyone wants to feel of service, right? And it's so easy to say, but if we just pay them a little bit more money, they'll work harder. I don't think that's true. I think that's not true. Give them something to believe in. Give them something that makes their heart explode with joy because they're doing something they love and serving a constituency, a group of people that they care about. They will work 24 hours a day, right? And when people tap into that purpose, they are unstoppable. And the best leaders we work with are able to do that. They're able to help people connect with their sense of purpose. They tell a story that makes people feel like what we're doing is important. And it's not BS. It really is important. Yeah.
So two other things to connect on what you were saying there that I think are important to help our listeners really grasp it further is one, I know this being a logotherapist, and that is that when people self-transcend, which is about serving other people, that is where they get their greatest fulfillment and their greatest sense of really well-being, is to really serve other people, to be useful, as you're saying. And then the other piece that I learned through my research about meaning and work and identity years ago that I've been building on is that people do want to feel part of something bigger than themselves that aligns with their values, because what that does is it allows them to feel elevated and expanded in their person. So then, to your point, if they then are part of an organization where they can then see how their individual purpose is aligned and threaded through that of the organization, it is the most beautiful, fulfilling thing. They will be motivated to the end of the earth for you because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about, the great companies of our time, they were all solving some big problem that everyone was excited about.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not to belabor Apple, but Apple's woven throughout the book because of my business partner John's long-standing relationship with the company. People felt like they were on a mission in the early days of Apple, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're here to democratize computers, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, the team at Hinge, right? We're here to make relationships happen. We work with another company that we kind of bookend the book with stories of Bombas, a company here in New York City. They make socks, they make T-shirts, they make underwear. Pretty normal. But guess what? They give a pair of socks or another item to the homeless population for everyone they sell. So everyone in that company is rallied around this idea of we are serving an underserved population, and they go home feeling great.
Yeah, I love that. I have two more questions for you here before we get on the wire here. And you say in your book, and I completely, absolutely agree to that, and this is what part of the work that I do, is that it's hard for an organization to have a sense of purpose if the leader doesn't have one. So how do you, just quickly, just a little bit of a snippet here, how do you help leaders detect their purpose, to discover their purpose?
Yeah. A lot of times it's helping. I ask people often, who is most important to you to serve, right? Because as you said, it all comes down to service. Purpose is really about service.
It is, yeah.
One group of people or another. I think it's one of the things that's really distinctive about humanity. We all have an inner drive to be of service. And that leader, if they say, I'm just working in service of my bank account, this is a company without a soul, right?
Right. And
So
that's not purpose, by the way, either.
that's not purpose. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we often help them tap into, there's a story there. There's a story of, well, actually I started this company. One of our clients, Greg Huber, he started his company because his wife had died of cancer. And he said, I want no one else to have to go through what I went through. Now, of course, it's a really hard climb. We're still working on trying to figure out cancer, but his company, Grail, is dedicated to early detection, which is saving millions of lives, right? Dave Heath, who started Bombas, he was reading an article one day and he said, how are socks the number one most requested item in homeless shelters? That's weird. And there's no one who does a one-to-one, meaning sell one and then donate one. Tom Shoes had done something like that. Warby had given away glasses, but no one was doing socks. He was like, I want to help the homeless population. And guess what? If you walk around New York City with Dave Heath today, as I do on our coaching meetings, he stops and talks to every single homeless person. He gives a couple bucks. He treats them as human beings, and it's really beautiful to watch.
That's wonderful, Edward. Great stories. I wish I could have you on longer. We've come to the end of the show. This show is listened by people around the world, Edward, who are really out to be able to help create workplaces where people actually want to come to work and do their best. We create inspirational leaders who lead them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with?
I just want to leave everyone with the idea that you too can lead with heart, no matter where you are in an organization. Leading with heart isn't just for the CEO. It's not just for the C-suite. It's for anyone at any stage in their career. It's how we show up for each other that makes a difference.
I am delighted to know you and have read your book and be enlarged by you, enlightened by you, Edward. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's been great to have you.
It's been wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Listeners, viewers who want to learn more about Edward, John, or the book that they wrote, Leading with Heart, or the work they actually do coaching executives at Velocity, go to velocitycoaching.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on with Captain T.D. Smyers, who leverages 30-plus years in executive leadership across all three major economic sectors to pass the torch to the next group of top execs as an executive coach. We talked about what he's recently learned about what Generation Z really wants from work and how leaders can help them get it. Next week, we'll be on the show with Russ Laraway talking about his new book, When They Win, You Win. Being a great manager is simpler than you think. See you there. Remember that work is at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.